My name's Clint Patterson, and today I've got a fabulous guest. She's been on the podcast some years ago, actually, and she is back today to talk about something totally different. Today, we are going to hear about how we can recreate our own reality and how we're all powerful enough to do this with our minds and how we can become more conscious. She's written a book called Bridging Science and Spirit. It's Dr. Nisha Manek. Back. Welcome. Thank you for joining me again.
Good to see you, Clint, and happy Sunday to you from California. It's quiet out here, raining in Santa Cruz, but it's so delightful to see you again.
You too, absolutely. We always enjoy chatting to each other privately, and we decided to put this podcast together because I'm reading your book at the moment, and I'm finding it very fascinating, and I just wanted to invite you and have you be able to share this really, really important topic, something that I love. I love talking about the power of the mind. I've been into this my whole life. My dad always told me, you know, if you visualize what you want in your life, then you can achieve it. And whilst I hadn't had any science on this and so forth, my dad's so passionate about this. I've been thinking about it my whole life, and we're going to talk about it more. And you've dove straight into the physics behind it, which is just so fascinating. So now, for our listeners who haven't listened to your episode in the past, and you're a rheumatologist. You treat people with rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, lupus, and all of the conditions that I cover on this show. Why did you sort of find this passion to explore the mind? Yeah.
Great question, Clint. You know, I'm very much a conventional scientist. And, I must say, your dad was on the right track. And in a sense, when I grew up in Kenya, I knew that there was much more to us. It was my family surrounding an environment is very grounded in spirituality, really. I grew up in a household like that. And, when my father passed, when I was very young, about 8 years old, I decided to find the truth. I decided that I was going to find the truth behind life. And I never changed my mind. And the way to find truth in our world is through science, through the scientific endeavors, the questions, the protocols. And so I left Kenya when I was about 16 or 17, and I went to actually Ohio. At Case Western Reserve, I was a chemistry major. Long story short, then I went to medical school at Glasgow University in Scotland. And I trained in internal medicine in London. And I'm a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians and a fellow of the American College of Physicians. Now, I say all of this because for me, science is my heartbeat in a sense. You know, I really pay attention to my body, my hygiene, my vaccinations, all of those things play a role in how I approach my daily life. So I wear my seatbelt. I always put that as an example. I take my vitamin D. So science is very much an important part of our knowledge and understanding of ourselves. So here I am at Stanford University. I did my fellowship in rheumatology there. And I went to Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, from Stanford to Minnesota, in a very robust, conventional clinical environment, excellent care, And here I was doing the top-notch conventional care. But there's a gap. There's a gap. What I was doing every day was chemical medicine, right? I look at blood test results. I look at the biochemistry of people. I look at that information and then advise my patients. But there was a stubborn gap. Not everybody got better, despite the best of the biologicals, the best of analysis, the best minds together. Here we have a stubborn gap. So why is that? And so I'm going to read a little section of my book. I wrote a letter to myself, okay? Congratulations, Nisha, member of the graduating class of 1991. Descartes would be proud of you. Yes, he would, for he may have been a philosopher and all that. But he said the preservation of health has always been the principal end of my studies. To that end, the Cartesian agenda to promote rationalism has been magnificently carried out in medicine. What do I mean by that? Cartesian agenda. We in medicine have formed a randomized controlled trial to find things that work and things that don't. But from this immense agenda has come so much data based on just chemistry. But we know that's not enough. And so in my book, I also spell out the problems. And I'm going to read that little section too. You'll be seeing an excessive need for certainty with randomized controlled data. You'll see physician burnout. And you will see suicide rates rising amongst your peers. These are problems few people actually talk about, okay? Many hospitals now have chief wellness officers to address fatigue and the problems of physician burnout. So medicine grapples with its problems incrementally, forever tinkering with incentives, EHRs, and all of that. So I looked at this problem at the Mayo Clinic and I saw that we are just doing biochemistry, but we have a much larger issue on hand, things that we don't look at. We don't look at the energetic pathways of the human body system. We are made of information, energy, and consciousness. But how do we get there? How do we get there? And so in Mayo, I made that sort of jump in my thought system. And it actually came through a book chapter called around the I should say, science of Qigong. Qigong is a energy medicine practice. Okay, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga are in that umbrella. So I was invited to write a book chapter for the Mayo Clinic textbook of complementary therapies, and Dr. Bauer, who's the editor, said, "You write on Qigong. You seem to be so enthusiastic about it." I was, and there'd been no serious look at the data until then. It was in 2006. So here I am looking at the data for Qigong. And along the same time, I was looking at National Institute of Health data for complementary medical therapies and physician attitudes. Because we know if you look at Americans, 1 out of 3 use some form of complementary medicine. And it's rheumatic diseases that lead the way. Back pain, neck pain, gout, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic, lupus. They all look to complementary therapies. They want to find out how they can help themselves beyond complementary therapies. So this is really fascinating that rheumatology is leading the way. And yet, what were the physician attitudes? Okay, so I looked at the data. So there were 600 rheumatologists who were invited to answer the questions, a short questionnaire, and 600 people were invited, and 58% replied to this questionnaire. So, with these kinds of surveys, 58% is a very healthy number, actually. And this was the surprising fact, Clint, if I can summarize the results. My colleagues in rheumatology love complementary therapies. Actually, they do recommend massage. They do recommend glucosamine. They do tell their patients about how to take care of gout using, good nutritional ideas. These are very sensible. But there was one outlier where my colleagues do not believe in it and wouldn't recommend it. And that was energy medicine. So if you look at massage, where more than 60 to 70% of my colleagues were saying, yeah, we believe in it, we would recommend it. Yep, we don't understand glucosamine, but I think it's worth a try. Energy medicine, less than 10%. It was such a stark difference. And I thought, whoa, wait a second here. So why is that? Why doesn't energy medicine have the respect? And yet I was investigating it with the book chapter. And I can tell you, Qigong in 2006 had pretty robust evidence. Okay. It had help in asthma, help in children's learning, help in sleep, help in digestion. There was this sort of mismatch, you know. And I think one of the issues about the mismatch is that we're not educated about energy in medicine.
Mm.
Physicians do not have a framework to understand energy medicine. When we talk energy, we talk about calories, what you eat. But that's not just the energy. You know, energy is much, much more. And that's when I realized physics has the knowledge about energy, and it's about thermodynamics. Okay. So here I am. And I know I'm talking a lot, but you can always interrupt me, Clint, okay?
Yeah, let me just recap what you've said so far, and then I can guide listeners as to where we're going here as well. I'm sure they're finding this really fascinating, and I just want to let everyone know where we're heading. We are heading to some really practical, implementable information here that you can put into your lives immediately so that you can start to use the energy that you have just been talking about to be able to benefit your own life. Not just if you have a rheumatic disease, but if you just want to have more happiness and just be able to create a better life for yourself in the way my dad talked about with picturing outcomes and so forth. And we're going to get there quite shortly because we're about to get into you meeting one of the most incredible physicians of our time and how he, through studying his work, helped guide you in, and influenced much of the information that you put in your book. And then we're going to talk about these implementable tools. So that's where we go. And I understand from what you've described so far that you wanted to understand this energy aspect of our health from a point of view of not just physicians' health, because you were seeing that physicians were having mental issues and suicidal thoughts and depression problems, but also in your upbringing, you had this as part of your life, and now it seems to be missing from your profession. So you had it from both your personal and from your colleagues' viewpoint. And then when you found that Qigong, which is a form of exercise, energy movement that my friend Joel Osborne does every single day. So I'm very familiar with what he doesn't miss a day. If he's traveling like a long international flight, he'll do it in the bathroom at the airport before he gets on the plane. He never misses a day.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so you've seen the impact on patients through looking at the scientific evidence as a review, and so you know that it's important to you, it's important to your colleagues, and it's important to your patients. And so that's where we're up to, and this is where we're going.
So, So here I am, I'm researching Qigong and energy. And you know, Clint, I remember in medical school, we do anatomy. We dissect the body to find out about its structure. It's a very fundamental knowledge in the doctor's mindset and toolkit. There's no energy highways or pathways. But so it doesn't exist in our anatomy, but it doesn't mean it's not there. And so do you see, we already had a mindset, unless you see it, it's there. So that's the first issue. So I stumbled into WilliamATiller's work. He calls energy subtle energies. And I think the word subtle got my attention because when I do Tai Chi, you're right, you feel something and it's there. It's very powerful and it's connected to your intention. You intend to do this practice. So here is WilliamATiller, who's published a lot of papers, physicist at Stanford University, very well known. He's a material scientist and physicist, and he has an expertise in crystals. He's still around. He is 90 years old now. And so when I stumbled into his work and read his papers, I couldn't understand them. Full of equations and, you know, terms I couldn't get my head around. But I knew there's a gift here. I need to to go here? And I wrote to him. So, he didn't reply to me. Finally, I meet him in Arizona. He's retired in Scottsdale. And I realized that this is somebody who is my mentor. He really balances both ends. He's a tremendous physicist. He knows the mathematical knowledge, and he's also somebody who's inner developed. And I'll say why. One of his experiments in the 1970s was very unusual, and he did this in parallel with conventional science. He realized that humans are much, much more than just chemistry, this atom and molecules bag of things. We're not just a sack of chemical impulses, and we're this intention. Where does this fit into the great scheme of science? And so he did something very interesting in Stanford. He created a gas discharge mechanism. What this is that two glass plates, and sandwiched between them is a gas, okay, carbon dioxide, xenon, and others. And what you have to do with the gas discharge is connect it to a battery, put enough energy in it so you release an electron which bangs into another electron, and soon enough you have an avalanche of electrons. It's like a neon light, okay? So he said, okay, rather than putting electricity, can my intention, my subtle energy, have enough input to do this neon light without touching the device? So here you have a very delicate device. He stands with his hands over it. He's not touching it, maybe about 6 inches from it, and closes his eyes and intends it. He visualizes that this thing was going to light up. And guess what? He was doing it every single time. And he tried this not only with himself, but with healers, with Stanford students, with all age groups, old, young, everybody can do this. They can make this gas discharge start chattering away without touching it. Immense finding. This is in the early 70s. Can you believe this? So he was doing something really weird. But basically what he's showing is this. Human intention has the power to change something without physically touching it. You and I, with our intention, has enough subtle energy to change something out there. Okay? And it's not a natural force. It's not like gravity. It's not nuclear forces. And it's not electromagnetic. Okay? Electromagnetic, he didn't put electricity. Okay? That's electromagnetic. So subtle energies, the word subtle can be confusing because we think it's weak, but it's not. Subtle means it's very hard to detect with our instruments. We don't yet have the scientific instruments to readily detect it. That's why medicine can't see it. Yeah. But it's there. Yeah. But it's there. Okay? When you do Qigong, oh yeah, you can feel it. When I first did Qigong, my mind was blown up. I mean, I go from Rochester, Minnesota to Minneapolis. I have a very good friend, Master Ching-Yi Lin of Spring Forest Qigong Center. And here I'm doing Qigong level 1. And immediately within 5 minutes, I swore I could press a ball between my hands. I could intend that energy to go somewhere. Okay? It was like a play. For me, I don't have any illnesses, but it was tremendously energizing. And this was an inside out, not outside in. In medicine, we think of outside. We get the body, we try to fix it with chemical stuff. It's okay. It has its place. But Qigong was an inside out. Your acupuncture system is called into play. That's your energy pump. That's thermodynamics in action. And we'll come back to the tools, but I'll just stop here because, Clint, I want you to have a chance to give me some reflections.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the piece that you just mentioned about the influencing the gas chamber, is where I'm up to in your book. And I just put the book down, and again, I'm relaying several of the parts of your book to my wife because I have a science background. I did laser physics at university, so I find this stuff like super. I nerd out on this stuff. Like, it's my favorite stuff, and because I've thought about other things for a very long time. It feels like coming home. It feels so nice to read about these. In the book you cover historical influences of our history. And we won't touch upon all of them now for lack of time. But you talk about the influences and the challenges they faced and so forth. It's just really, really fascinating. But when it got to that point in the book, when you relay this experiment that you just told us, it just confirms that what we all know that if we keep visualizing things in our life, they tend to happen. And we're particularly, unfortunately, often visualizing bad things, like more bills coming in the mail, and it's all we talk about. And it seems to self-perpetuate bad things. But when we actually are aware of this power, we can utilize to create great things in our life. And I used to visualize pain-free, drug-free, back to maximum energy. And I'd visualize it. I'd indulge in that thought. I'd picture myself having a wonderful life. I pictured children. And I wrote down, and I have all my clients who follow my program write down and visualize all the reasons that they want to get well. And it's for all of these reasons. And the reasons, when they're listed, are things they can picture in their mind. And if you obsess on them, we know inside us intuitively that we have this power and that life is like that. And so an experiment that confirms it with the electron movement just makes it feel very concrete. And that
absolutely.
You then really pursued that. Can I just say as you're about to talk about now the writing of the book and working with Dr. Tiller, and then we'll get onto your onto your implementable tips here. All of this stuff is very valuable for folks. I loved how Dr. Tiller said he'll work with you, but only if you promise to meditate every day. That just gave me goosebumps. That gave me goosebumps.
So here we are, and by the way, you mentioned that people don't know their power. It's because science is very rational. And I called Rene Descartes. Descartes is very alive in our world today. He put together this rational science, okay? And I call him the Homo Dubitat, the skeptical man. We're Homo sapiens and we're Homo Dubitat. Okay. So, yes. And so he's still very much alive in us. And so when I met Tiller, he is an immense scientist. When I met him in Scottsdale, was the thing that really blew me away. First of all, he took a long time to answer my emails. It was this long silence, but I was very persistent. I knew in my heart, he has something about the truth. I need to find out what this is. So here he agreed to meet with me finally. And while we're having dinner, it's the memory of that is like it happened yesterday. 4 hours. We were together for 4 hours. I was actually quite terrified to meet him, actually. Oh, yeah, I was, what do you ask somebody? To me, he was like, I'm meeting the rock star of science. I was meeting like the rock star of science. What would you ask Einstein? Right. So what would you ask Darwin? I mean, you're going to meet somebody to me, he was like that. And I asked him one singular question. That's, for me, nailed it. And I said, do you know A Course in Miracles? I was a student of A Course at that time. And there's something about his physics model that if you're inner developed, if you're high in consciousness, your intention takes on a whole new power. You can manifest things very, very quickly. So I'm telling him, and I thought I was showing off a bit. I thought, hey, do you know A Course in Miracles? Then he said something that I thought, oh my gosh, okay. Helen Schuckman is a scribe of A Course in Miracles. And A Course in Miracles is one of the most classic modern spiritual texts of our time. Helen Schuckman was a professor of psychology at Columbia. a scientist herself, also a scribe, and she had brought the original manuscript of A Course in Miracles to Dr. Tiller. Can you believe it? He had actually been one of the original readers, and she invited him to found the Foundation for Inner Peace. And he said, I'd rather continue my work at Stanford. So that was phenomenal. And I realized here's somebody who knows spirituality is handling one of the most important textbooks and also doing physics. He has both.
Yeah.
If I can say, Tiller was like a sage who happened to know mathematics. He had both worlds. And so, but he told me, no, I don't think you should really, you belong at the Mayo Clinic. He actually refused to work with me. But 3 months later, he called me out of the blue with most important phone call. And he said, before I agree to work with you, you must promise me one thing. Will you meditate every day? I mean, come on.
Come on. That's just amazing.
Look, Clint, to put it into perspective, I put applications to med school, applied to do this, Stanford. Not one time has any institution, any place said, do you meditate? In future, we should even ask our presidents, do you meditate every day? Because we want a commander-in-chief who can be not only making the right decisions, but bring a holism in his own mindset, that there is a kind of stillness. So we need to look at our own selves in medicine, in every industry. And now, mindfulness is a huge thing. Thank goodness. We're getting our priorities suddenly right side up slowly. And this virus pandemic has speeded things up for us. So Tiller, when he said that, I knew I had my mentor. And the next day I actually went to my chairman at Mayo and said, I really need to do this. I need to go to Scottsdale, Arizona. And I packed up in the middle of winter my Jeep and drove for 1.5 days nonstop to arrive in Scottsdale.
Oh, God.
Empty apartment. I had an airbed. It was so incredible. I look back and I was so brave. I just had no reservations. I told you I was in pursuit of the truth. Every Thursday we would meet. It was called actually Thursdays with Tiller. Every Thursday, just him and I would put a flip camera and put it on a stack of physics books and record everything. And we would have a dialogue. And the first thing he said was, you need to learn the laws of thermodynamics. Law, L-A-W, means it's the law. And so he approached his investigation of how human intention is lawful in our universe by applying it by really looking at thermodynamics. Very wise. This is the law. It's not theory. It's not quantum theory. It's not cosmology. But thermodynamics plays out whether you're in the space station, whether you're on the moon and boiling a cup of tea there, or you're on planet Earth. It plays out. So thermodynamics is very important. I won't go into it, but we're going to now go into the tools.
Yeah.
Because I think
before you do,
go ahead.
Not to delay things anymore, because I'm sure we've whet the appetite enough of people. But what I wanted just to emphasize is what an interruption to the trajectory of your career path to suddenly say, look, I've met someone who I think is such an extraordinary human being who has a mentor capacity like no one else I've ever seen. And I'm just going to stop what I'm doing. And I'm just going to go and become an understudy and become humble and just start from scratch with my learning all over again. And that's what you did. And then the book that you wrote is like all that you were able to learn and summarize to folks like myself who just want to gain from the book the sort of the breakdown, the summary of what you experienced.
Absolutely. So what the book and what I learned was that science is incredible. It is a pathway to knowledge, but so is spirituality. They're complementary. And there's a gap in those two. Scientific